And I am Christopher Lloyd of the Film Yep, and I'm joined here by my friend and colleague.
I'm Emily Wheeler. I write with Film Inquiry.
And so we wanted to talk about the news, maybe not huge news, but interesting news, and that is about Elliot Page. And for those of you who don't know, Elliot Page is the name that now being used by the actress formerly known as Ellen Page, who announced, I think it was just yesterday, that she was coming out as trans and non-binary and wants to use the pronouns he and they, and will be known henceforth as Elliot Page. And so I'm sure there's going to be a transition period where people are going to be saying it wrong, or saying, we'll probably have like a few months of people saying Elliot Page used to be Ellen Page, but you know, at some point we'll have to stop dead naming him. So we wanted to kind of just dig into a little bit and talk about what that's going to mean for his perception in Hollywood, his roles, the big hit Netflix show that he's currently on, where he plays a female character. So I don't know, what is your initial take on this? Because I figured there'd be, mean people on Twitter saying mean things on Twitter, because that kind of really is what Twitter is for, it seems. But I'm just more interested on, just because this is kind of unprecedented, really, to have an actor of this stature make this transition. I'm interested to see what it's going to be like for him and for us.
Right. I mean, my take when I initially saw it, I was really excited because I think, kind of as you're alluding to, he would be one of the major people to have transitioned at this point in their career. I mean, everyone's going to point out Oscar-nominated actor. However, that's been over 10 years now at this point, because it was way back for Juno.
Yeah.
But he still managed to stay around, kind of, I think, in pop culture knowledge. I think most people will know who he is, recognize his face, and recognize the name. And so I do think it seemed to, from my perception, the news was really hitting much more widespread than perhaps some other people who may be transitioning at points in their career. For instance, something that just absolutely did not make the news that I saw in any of the same ways, I think only 2 or 3 days before, Rhea Butcher basically announced the same thing. However, they are primarily a stand-up comic, not nearly as big even in that scene as I think Elliot would be in an actor. But obviously as a stand-up, they then go and do a lot of television and they do acting roles. So you're also talking about someone who's also an actor. But again, it kind of goes to show the comparison that I think most people would not have heard that Rhea made that announcement. Meanwhile, I think everyone was picking up, all the major news organizations that I saw were picking up about Elliot, which is great. But then the question is, you're kind of alluding to, where does the industry go from here and how does everyone take it?
Yeah, we're having this big debate within the industry right now about, who plays what roles. Is it appropriate for a straight cis actor to play a trans character, or for straight women to play gay characters? And all sorts of thoughts about that. So I'm curious in this situation, because particularly because she's the star. I think it's fair to say the star, top of the bill of the Umbrella Academy on Netflix, which just had 2 seasons, going into its 3rd, and of course he plays a female character on that show, and presumably is going to continue to play a female character on that show. The character is not going to change within her own life, referring to the character. So that'll be an interesting thing, just because it has been rare, but usually a novelty for there to be cross-gender portrayals. I mean, the biggest one is Linda Hunt winning an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for The Year of Living Dangerously, playing a male character. And a few other examples like that, but that'll be interesting just in the thing. It's sort of like in midstream, the star of a decent-sized streaming show transitioning.
Exactly. And honestly, it didn't even cross my mind. A friend of mine actually pointed out immediately that Netflix, who handles Umbrella Academy, announced that there's not going to be recasting. Elliot's going to stay playing the character of Vanya. I didn't see that they gave any information beyond that on if they would be changing anything about that character. I would hope he's involved personally in that decision or anything that goes on there. And I would hope that was a decision made mutually between all parties involved. But you never know with contracts and things.
Yeah.
But I am very excited. I think having that role be steady throughout is going to be kind of key. Because, I mean, there are a lot of actors out there working fairly steadily, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, that would identify as not cisgender. Somewhere either non-binary, trans, somewhere along these lines. You know, GLAAD puts out their stats. You can kind of go look these things up if you really want to. But there are actors out there who would identify similarly to Elliot, who is working steadily. And I think that has been a thing that has actually changed quite a bit over the last 5 years. I don't know if you saw that as much 5 years ago. So I do think having a steady role and then also having the industry kind of shifting around these ideas is really going to make this, I anticipate a much more steady, maybe not even a transition. I think it's going to flow very nicely, and I think the roles will continue to come for him.
But the big question for me will be beyond Umbrella Academy, because he's still pretty young. I think he's only like, what, maybe early 30s. So obviously still got the bulk of his career ahead of him. So is he primarily going to play male characters? Is he primarily going to play female characters? Is he going to look for more and more non-binary roles as Hollywood seems to embrace that slowly and incrementally more? I mean, I'm curious, like from a casting director perspective, like, let's say you were already in discussions about casting Ellen Page as a female role in a big movie, and now this news, do you think they hesitate?
I doubt it, honestly. I mean, particularly looking at the kind of roles Elliot has been doing recently, he's not been doing huge movies. And I really only think that would become an issue if you're really talking like $100 million movie. Maybe people would start thinking about that. But, you know, even in big movies, you're starting to get a lot of, like I said, non-binary trans actors that are appearing in big movies. I kind of quickly went and looked it up because I said, GLAAD did the stats. There were 4 just in 2019 in large mainstream studio movies. They were not playing transgender or non-binary characters, but there were 4 actors appearing in them. None of them were starring in it. But again, I don't think Elliot hasn't really done a starring role in a huge budget movie in years. You know, it would probably be Inception would be the last one I could think of. Yeah,
would probably be it.
I was like, he appeared in some of the X-Men movies, but I would not consider him a main character in that franchise. So yeah, I mean, looking at the size of roles he typically does, he is typically leading roles. So dependent on, you know, if he was in talks for particular roles and he's not comfortable playing that anymore, I'd imagine he'd just be able to back out.
Yeah, I mean, I think from his perspective, assuming a embracing society in Hollywood that was willing to cast him wherever he wanted to go and whatever fit. I mean, you could look in the sense that it gives him a great deal of freedom because he's not tied down to just female roles or just non-binary roles or just female roles or male roles or whatever. I mean, so from his perspective, I think there's the potential for a lot of freedom and creativity. I don't know, you know, how much or how soon Hollywood, which still in a lot of ways, even though it's generally seen as sort of being on the progressive left, I think in a lot of ways, systemically, there's still a conservative, maybe conservative isn't the right word, but there's sort of an adherence to tradition and doing things the way it's always been done within that culture. So I'm a little skeptical that they'll be embracing that potential freedom as much as he could.
I agree. Kind of, and again, to add on to that, kind of something you alluded to earlier, there's a lot of conversation about who plays what roles and what is appropriate. And I think, as we've seen, a lot of backlash to a lot of casting roles, even with big name, particularly in big budget movies or with big names, you get a lot of pushback. And I do think that has made studios a little bit gun shy on casting people. So, I mean, that gets into territory of, I don't know how people are going to react to it. I don't know how that's going to affect decisions of casting. The other thing, actually, I immediately thought of when I heard the news is, oh, this is great. Not only because he's a very prominent actor and one of the most prominent to do that, but also because he has done some producing and has moved into that. So if it does become an issue of, are people not sure if they want to cast him or not, or if it's appropriate to cast him, he has some connections in the industry to really start producing content maybe for himself.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, these days, you know, with literally like Oscar nominated films being shot on an iPhone, you know, it would not be hard for him to either out of his own pocket or just, you know, just having Elliot Page wants to star in this tiny little indie movie that's being made for $300,000. I don't think they would have trouble finding backers for that.
Exactly, because I do still think his name and his face will carry enough that he can still be getting those size of movies made.
What about other people? Do you think we're going to see more actors and actresses willing to reveal themselves and declare to the world, I'm trans, I'm non-binary, these are my pronouns? I don't know. Again, this is a big step for him. I mean, whatever else you want to think about him or his roles, I mean, this is a really brave move. So I'm wondering if you think we're going to start seeing more of this from more high profile people. Like you said, not those sort of like comics that maybe most people haven't heard of.
I don't know if you're going to get a lot. I mean, that depends on, you know, who the big name actors are and if they feel this is a part of their life. However, I do think you're going to start seeing a lot more actors, prominent actors, where this is a part of their life. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be people you already know, but there's definitely, again, in the last probably 3 years even, if you look at people who are moving up in the industry, there's a lot of people identifying as non-binary, identifying as trans, using they, them pronouns for whatever way they want to label themselves. I mean, so yeah, I think whether it is more big stars kind of coming out and making these announcements, maybe not. I don't anticipate a ton of that, but I do anticipate simply because at the lower levels, as people are moving up, you're going to be encountering people who become big stars where that's already a part of what people know about them.
Right. I think you're absolutely spot on. I think it's going to be less about here's an A-list or A- B+ list performer coming out. And it's more going to be like someone that you've probably seen in movies, maybe not paid so much attention to, but they've been around for a few years. And then they get big or become more prominent, as you say, having already been living that life for a while.
Yeah, I mean, like, as I kind of alluded to before, there were 4 in 2019 actors who would identify as non-cisgender in major studio movies that a lot of people saw. You're talking about Spider-Man Far From Home, you're talking about Hustlers, John Wick, big one. I think Asia Kate Dillon, I think a lot of people know them. And I think, but I don't know if everyone knows that aspect of their life. I don't know if everyone who watched the last John Wick movie, they played the adjudicator, if you did not know who that person is, registered that at all or knew it. So again, I don't know if it's going to be as huge of an issue just because it's not necessarily something that's going to come into play to an audience unless they really want to tune into that aspect of an actor's life.
Yes. All right. Well, it's a brave new world for him. I think it's an interesting new world for us. My only light note that I'll put on this is if he does intend to pursue like traditional male lead roles in like romances, he is going to quickly run into the issue of finding an actress who is shorter than him. Because I think Elliot Page is known to be quite tiny, like 5 feet tall or something like that. And so much of society, including Hollywood, still has this, I think, ridiculous, but it's ingrained in our culture and in our personal preferences of the dude needs to be taller. So that might be a challenge for him, but I would say all in all, probably the least of his worries.
Yeah, I don't think that'll be. I mean, Tom Cruise has done fine for himself. Maybe not that short, but definitely not nearly as tall as a lot of his female co-stars have been over the years.
All right, but maybe his stature a little higher in other ways these days. All right. Well, thanks, Emily. I really enjoyed our talk, and this sort of thing we're going to try and be doing more on the Film Yap, and hopefully we'll include you and some of our other IFJA colleagues, just because we love, whenever we get together, which isn't much these days, we always just love yakking with each other. So I said, hey, let's do this and put it up there for everyone to participate in.
Absolutely. We got to figure out some way to all talk to each other nowadays.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care. Good to see you.
All right, good to see you.